I came across something that I thought was quite interesting and a history that, I think some of us sort of know a little bit. Russia had Alaska as its territory for a long time, for a couple hundred years, and that there are a lot of Orthodox churches in Alaska. But I think one of the things we may not realize is that Alaska has like 6 or 7 saints. Orthodox saints that came out of Alaska. And I don't think any other state comes anywhere near that. And last year in June, the first female American Orthodox saint was canonized, and it is Saint Olga, and I can't say the name, so I put it on the board, Quenthuk. She is called the Matushka of all Alaska. Matushka is the word for mother in Russian, but it's used also as the priest's wife. Her husband eventually did become a priest. Matushka would be our equivalent of presbytera. So she's the Matushka of all Alaska. And she was canonized just last year. She's the first Alaskan native female, and of course the first female in all of America to be canonized as a saint. So I thought we'd take a little bit, we were going to do St. Herman of Alaska today. It's a long video. We'll do part of his video a little bit later, but I thought it would be interesting to show you a little bit of this. This is from a documentary. It's called Sacred Alaska, and you can find it on Amazon Video. And this is just a little segment of it. And I loved this segment. At the very beginning, there's only a sentence or two about St. Innocent of Alaska, who I think we're all somewhat familiar with. But after those, it goes into something that seemed quite beautiful as to why the Alaskan people took to Orthodoxy so easily. And sometimes it's hard to hear exactly what the one woman is saying, but she clearly says, Orthodoxy was never forced on the native people, and you'll see why. So let's go ahead and start that. I'm going to read something from Library of Congress exhibitions and it's on Russian Orthodoxy in Alaska. The story of many remarkable priests and monks who served the church in Alaska, recounted in a number of valuable journals in the church archives, is one of incredible achievements against overwhelming odds. They contended daily with bitter cold and deep snows, traveling by dog sled to attend their widely dispersed parishes. The constant lack of essential resources led them to sell candles and books and to sometimes sacrifice their own salaries to meet parish expenses. Not the least troublesome was the gnawing competition from shamans for the souls of the natives, exacerbated by the natives' need to abandon church and school for long periods of time in order to survive. They would take off for months at a time to go and hunt and fish, so they weren't around a church. They were really in the wilderness. Despite the sale of Alaska to the United States and the incursion of other sectarian groups, Catholic and Protestant, the Russian Orthodox priests continued their mission, leaving an indelible mark upon the culture of the native Alaskans, visible even today. And when they say like Protestants and Catholics coming in, there was a boat of Alaskan monks and priests that was taken by Spaniards, and they took them to San Francisco. One of the saints in Alaska is St. Peter the Aleut. This is not nice to read, but it's the reality of what occurred. In 1815, a group of Aleut seal and otter hunters, including Peter, who eventually was canonized, were captured by Spanish sailors who took them to San Francisco for interrogation. With threats of torture, the Roman Catholic priests in California attempted to force the Aleuts to deny their Orthodox faith and to convert to Roman Catholicism. When the Aleuts refused, the priest had a toe severed from each of Peter's feet. Peter still refused to renounce his faith, and the Spanish priest ordered a group of California Indians to cut off each finger of Peter's hands, one joint at a time, finally removing both hands. They eventually disemboweled him, crowning him his life with martyrdom. They really tried to rid Orthodoxy out of Alaska, but they were not successful. And I thought the video talking about what they believed, like you don't just go and get an animal. That animal sacrifices himself for you, for your benefit and for your health. And I thought it was just a beautiful way that they look at life and how they were so easily able to understand Orthodoxy. And in other parts, they talk about love. The elders always taught love. The missionaries taught love. The missionaries were, and we'll learn this in the St. Herman video, the missionaries were sent because Russia had fur traders who went into Alaska to trade fur. And this company, the Russian-American Fur Company, they had requested monks to come and priests to come and allow services for their employees. However, this Russian-American company, they were not nice at all, and they were terrible to the native people. And the missionaries wrote back to Russia about what was going on, and they sent more people, and the church was incredibly helpful to stop what was going on with this company, and especially the owner of it and the way that he was behaving and cruel. He was very cruel towards the Alaskan people. So this is called Sacred Alaska. If you want to see the whole video, it is on Amazon. Okay, so let's go ahead with Trision Films.
It was a cold and rainy morning at the small port village on Kodiak Island in Alaska. A small group of natives followed an old monk to his boat, which would take him to his hermitage on Spruce Island. They were reluctant to part from the holy man, for his presence filled them with an otherworldly peace and joy. As the elder settled into his small boat and prepared to leave, one of the men asked, "Father Herman, how do you live alone in the woods? Don't you become bored?" He seemed amused by this question and cheerfully replied, "No, I am not alone there. God is there just like God is everywhere. Holy angels are there. And how is it possible to become bored with them? With whom is it more pleasant to converse? With people or angels? With angels, of course." The group was stunned by his response, and as they contemplated the meaning of his words, looking at him in awe, the elder made the sign of the cross towards them and quickly set off for his little island, with a warm smile on his weathered face. Soon he was enveloped by the thick fog which hung above the water, his boat disappearing from their view as he headed for Spruce Island. St. Herman of Alaska, the enlightener of North America, was born in 1751 in the village of Kadom in the Voronezh province of Russia. He was born to a very pious peasant family, and his name was Yegor Ivanovich Popov. From his earliest years, Yegor displayed a remarkable propensity for the spiritual life and a yearning for solitude. Not much is known about his early years, but it is clear that he chose the difficult path of the monastic life from a very young age. As a boy, he would spend much of his time at the Sarov monastery, where he often went on pilgrimages. For a time he lived in the forest of Sarov, in a cell by the elder Varlam, who instructed him in the ways of monasticism. There, in the thick forests surrounded by wild animals, young Yegor's love for solitude and silence grew even more as he took his first steps on the narrow path of the ascetic life. When he came of age, Yegor was drafted by the Russian army and was forced to leave his beloved Sarov. During his army years, he served as a junior clerk in the city of Kādom. But in 1777, Yegor was released from military service due to poor health, and in the following year he entered the Sarov monastery as a novice. Little is known about this period of his life, except that sometime early on, Yegor fell gravely ill. A malignant tumor appeared on his throat, rapidly swelling in size and warping the contours of his face. The pain was excruciating, and a relentless torment made swallowing and breathing almost impossible. As the tumor grew in size and festered, it was clear that death was imminent. Despite this, Yegor did not seek a doctor. Instead, he fell on his knees before the icon of the Mother of God, which adorned his cell wall, and poured out his heart in fervent prayer, beseeching God for healing. Hours melted away, and day turned into night, while Yegor remained kneeling, transfixed and unmoving. Finally, he took a wet cloth, wiped it across the Theotokos' face, and placed it on the festering mass. Exhausted, he fell to the floor and slept. In his dream, he saw the Mother of God shining in a golden light, which was radiating from her in all directions. Looking at Yegor with complete compassion and love, she reached out and gently touched his neck. At that moment, Yegor felt the pain begin to melt away, and as he woke up, he realized that the tumor, which had almost claimed his life, was completely gone. In its place, nothing but a small mark remaining. With boundless gratitude, he began to thank the Lord and the Theotokos for answering his prayers and healing him. It was 1781. A hieromonk named Nazarius of Sarov was appointed as the new abbot of the monastery of Valam. At this time, this renowned monastery was deserted and desperately in need of revival. Perched atop a verdant island on the largest lake in Europe, Lake Ladoga, the proud and beautiful monastery is enveloped by dense forests of spruce and conifer, with abundant wildlife enriching its landscape. During the long winter months, the lake turns into solid ice, and the small islands are blanketed with untouched white snow. When Father Nazarius left Sarov for Valam, he took with him 4 novices, one of whom was Yegor. At Valam, Yegor was tonsured a monk in 1782, and was given the name Herman. In the following years, under the leadership of Elder Nazarius, the monastery of Valam flourished. New buildings sprung up to accommodate visitors, and more monks were added, drawn by the elder's reputation. This fostered a strong sense of brotherhood and deep devotion to God. This was a pivotal time in young Herman's life, for he developed a profound fondness for the monastery, as well as the brotherhood. He found solace in the tranquil waters of the lake, and fell deeply in love with the harmony of nature, God's wondrous creation, which stretched around him in every direction. After spending time in strict obedience in the monastery, Father Herman would become one of the hermits who retreated into the wilderness. He chose a secluded hermitage nestled deep in the dark forest, about a mile from the monastery. His hermitage is to this day called Herman's Field. There he spent time in prayer, and only on major feast days would he walk through the lush nature back to the monastery, where he would participate in the divine liturgy with his beloved brotherhood, and share a meal with them. He was frequently seen shedding tears during the Vespers service, deeply moved as he chanted along with his brothers the words of the canon, "O sweetest Jesus, save us sinners," and "O most holy Theotokos, save us." and always returning to his simple shelter deep into the wilderness, he would immerse himself in constant prayer, fasting, and repentance for an entire decade. Alaska was discovered by Russian sailors in 1741, and in only a few years had attracted many seasonal trappers, hunters, and traders from the Russian mainland. These hunters were known as promyshleniki, or frontiersmen. In the early 1780s, the Russian government granted monopolies to a few trading and trapping companies, allowing them to exploit Alaska's natural resources. One of those, the Golikov and Shelikov Company, founded the first permanent settlement on Kodiak Island. A few years later, in 1793, Shelikov appealed to the Russian Holy Synod to send a good priest with the necessary assistance to America. The Synod reported this to Empress Catherine II, who decided that not just one priest, but an entire mission should be sent to Alaska to tend to the needs of the Russians, and enlighten the Alaskan natives, especially those who desired to know Christ and be baptized. It was decided that the mission members would be chosen from the Valam Monastery. Abbot Nazarius took great care in choosing the members of the mission. After thoughtful contemplation, he chose 6 monks, each with unique virtues and strengths, and 4 novices alongside them. Among the chosen was Herman, who, filled with a fervent desire to serve the Lord and spread his love and joy in the world, eagerly accepted the invitation to go. Saint Innocent of Moscow later wrote about this mission. "It is indeed a holy endeavor, one equal to that of the apostles, to leave your homeland and go to the places that are remote, wild, and devoid of many of the comforts of life, in order to convert to the path of truth people who are still wandering in the darkness of ignorance, and to illuminate with the light of the gospel those who still have not seen this saving light. Blessed is he whom the Lord chooses and places in such a service." In December of 1793, the determined mission team of 10 men embarked on a long and exceedingly strenuous and dangerous journey. They traveled from Valam to St. Petersburg, and from there to Moscow, navigating through harsh conditions, and then continued towards Irkutsk. During this long journey in the middle of the winter, the group endured the extreme Siberian cold, horrible snowstorms, freezing nights, hunger and thirst, while traveling through some of Russia's most remote and inhospitable parts. And while many would have given up, this group knew not of fear, for God was with them. He who sent them on this long and frightening journey continually filled their hearts with courage and strength, even through the white taiga, the blinding snowstorm, and while trembling through frozen, moonless nights where no fire burned, their hearts, warmed and strengthened by God, felt His presence and beat in obedience to Him. After 3 long months, exhausted, they reached Irkutsk, where they recovered for 2 months before continuing along the river Lena toward Yakutsk. From there they rode on horseback to Okhotsk, from where a ship would finally take them to Alaska. They set sail from Okhotsk on August 13th, and after weeks at sea, the ship stopped at Unalaska Island at the beginning of September of the year 1794. Upon their arrival at Unalaska Island, the missionaries were received by the Alaskan natives with warm hospitality. Having been interacting with the Russian trappers, the natives knew about the Orthodox Christian faith and were very eager to learn more about it. The spark of warm curiosity, which had been ignited in their hearts, led them to welcome the missionaries with open arms. The monks were deeply moved by the warm reception of these people, who were eager to listen to the Christian message. With joy they watched the natives embrace the faith and quickly offered them the holy sacrament of baptism.